Hello and welcome to Motorsport Speak, the weekly motorsport podcast brought to you by the team behind Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday. My name is Daniel Lawrence and today we bring you a double bill of motorsport action. Later we'll speak about the 12 Hours of Sebring, but first, let's talk about the return of FormulaE. Back after a 7-week absence and returning with an enthralling race in the heat of Sao Paulo. Talking with me through the nail-biting finish and more is our FormulaE reporter Jack Smith. So let's proceed with some Motorsport Speak. Jack, how are you and did you enjoy the race?
Hi Dan, I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, it was such a great race. You could not take your eyes off it for a minute. I think it was possibly greatest advertisement Formula E has had yet for making a case for it being the most exciting major motorsport category in the world at the moment, because the race just, in less than 3 dozen laps, you had over 200 overtakes and so much going on that you could barely keep up with it. But yeah, and it was an incredible race.
Yeah, I think I'll have to agree with you there. It's sort of, obviously, you had the jostling for position, because obviously with the way Formula E works, nobody really wanted to lead for the majority of the race. But it turns out they were all forcing Sam Bird to sort of do the donkey work there and lead. When we had the safety car period, then all hell broke loose in the final laps. We had that stunning last ditch overtake round the outside by Sam Bird in the McLaren on Mitch Evans in the Jaguar to take McLaren's first Formula E win and Sam Bird's first win since 2021, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a race by Sam. And what a move at the end there.
Yeah, and it was an incredible overtake. And Sam, to be fair, as you said, they kind of were pushing him to lead the peloton for most of it. But he executed his attack modes really well. He did 2 in the first few laps. And that kind of kept him sustained for quite a long time. And once the 2 safety car periods happened, he just seemed to sort of come into his own. Once him and Mitch Evans lost Pascal Wehrlein, left them, they all got left behind. It was going to be a race between the two of them, and Sam, just was a bit of a do or die right at the end. And Mitch, to be fair to him, gave him enough room for them not to make contact. And it was great for Sam. I mean, I interviewed him just before FP1, and he said about how he was hoping to get a podium for McLaren very soon, but I don't think he realised it was going to be as soon as the next day, and then get a win as well. And it's just an incredible thing for McLaren as well. I mean, I counted that it's the 5th major motorsport category in which they've actually been winners in. They've won in Formula One, they've won in Indy cars, they've won the Le Mans 24 Hours, they've won in the old Can-Am series back in the 70s, and now they've got Formula E on that list as well now. So it's just another success for them, and one that I don't think they were particularly expecting to come this early.
Going into the weekend, Jaguar looked like they were going to be the dominant force. And I think Mitch Evans probably was odds on to win there until that last move from Bird. We also had Oliver Rowland in the Nissan do that expert undercut on the final corner to poach third place off of Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis. So it was a bit of a turnaround of the pecking order in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Nick Cassidy, I don't know, about 3-4 weeks ago, and he made the point that whilst Jaguar are the favourites and have got, there is reason for that, there are so many teams sort of following behind them that are showing quite a lot of pace. And he mentioned both the Nissan, the Works Nissan and the McLaren team for being very competitive and showing a lot of pace in Diriyah. And I think he also made the point that there are going to be races where we're going to qualify like 15th or 16th, because if it could happen to Jake Dennis in Diriyah, it can happen to anybody. And he did have a bad qualifying. He missed out in the group stage, and then crashed out of the race. So I think he's as disappointed as I'm sure he is. He's realistic enough to know that these things in Formula E just happen. And yeah, I mean, Roland again is second consecutive third place. I mean, he started 11th on the grid. Um, a little bit like Jay Dennis, actually. They sort of quietly just scythed their way through the pack, and yeah, just a incredible bit of hanging back just until the last corner, and then undercuts him and Verline for the podium place. It was quite unbelievable, really. But it was not the only great drive. I mean, we had Max Gunter as well, who took a 40 place grid penalty, went to the back, managed to time his stop go penalty in the first safety car, and made his way all the way up to ninth. There were so many good drives in that race. It was quite hard to keep track on all of the ones that there were. But yeah, as I say, there was an incredible amount of overtakes, and once the second safety car elapsed, all hell did break loose, and you were just never sure who was going to finish where until they crossed the line.
Yeah, as you say, there was so much action up and down the field, and particularly towards the end there. And you mentioned obviously with Dennis and Roland doing those sort of like calculated moves up the field. For me, and maybe for people who aren't too attuned to Formula E, it almost felt a bit like the way they calculated their way through the field, like picking people off one by one, and the fact that there was that sort of peloton and people jostling for position, not quite wanting to lead. It felt almost like a Moto 3 Grand Prix motorcycle race, because often in Moto 3, the junior category of MotoGP, because of the low powered nature of the bikes, they often settle into, especially races with longer track straights and stuff like that, they all settle into like this massive train of bikes slipstreaming, and nobody really wants to lead until the final few moments. But you do get sometimes these riders, they'll qualify really low down, and then all of a sudden in the final phrase, they're like right up there, and you're like, how did that happen? And I guess that's kind of with Roland, that's the same sort of thing, isn't it? He gets started with 11th, then he slowly manoeuvred and picked his way off. And he was very impressed with Diria. And obviously, yeah, you say like Jaguar, maybe they're the dominant force, but I think a dominant force in Formula E is a very different thing compared to other series, isn't it? Because we've had 4 winners in 4 races. Verline's won, Porsche have looked good, and Cassidy's looked good, and obviously Birds looked good. Jake Dennis had that amazing win in Diria where he absolutely smashed everybody in the first race. So it's a good time for Formula E, and it means that Nick Cassidy is still on top of the table because of different drivers taking their turns at the top, even though he had a let's say not the race he would have hoped for. Quite a sort of a scary incident there with his front wing.
Yeah, he has some front wing damage, and it just slowly started to work its way off to the point that it got caught under his front wheels, and he was then just a passenger after that. He was quite disappointed after qualifying, naturally, he knew it was always going to be an uphill battle. Whereas Mitch was disappointed too. He was high up enough to know that it was still all to play for, and he almost had the win in the bag. I think from the point of view of Jaguar being the favourites, it's because they've just been the most consistent team, that they've been in the points every race, and on the podium as well. But as Nick Cassidy said, sometimes you need a run of about 10 races out of however many just to be considered to be within the hunt for the championship. Porsche are still in there. They have seemed to have, to some extent, rectified all the problems that they had last season, which was qualifying. I think Verline could well have been the champion last year had he been able to have qualified consistently well, but he couldn't. But he's now got 2 pole positions. And I think, again, as Jake Dennis said after his bad qualifying in Diria, you've got the fact is that in Formula E, there is a sweet spot you have to get in qualifying as far as the tyres are concerned. And if you don't get that right, then you're going to be toast for the race, because you're just never going to be high up enough. And for Jake, again, on Saturday, that was the case for him. He did have a good race, but he worked his way backwards in qualifying, when he said that there was enough pace for them to win. It's just the unpredictability is what's throwing everything wide open, and that's what's keeping everybody guessing and on the edge of their seat.
Now it's not long really until we get to return to Formula E action once again, because we'll be going to a new circuit in Tokyo in 2 weeks' time. Obviously, so that means nobody's really sure what's going to happen there. What's the mood and the sort of, or what's your mood and feelings and anticipation with Formula E about to turn up in Tokyo?
Well, it's really exciting that we're going to have a brand new race on the calendar. It always is, and Tokyo is such a great location for a new race. It kind of makes a little bit of added interest that it comes 1 week before the Japanese Grand Prix. So in a way, I think Formula E are probably going to be hoping that the people that are going to be around for the Grand Prix are also going to be there for that too. Nick Cassidy, I know, is probably the most excited because he's done a lot of his junior racing in Japan, so he knows the country very well, and I think he's probably the most keen to show his worth there. And, this is one that Formula E kept under their hats until quite late in the day last year to announce this race. And it looks like a really good street circuit. I mean, all the street circuits in Formula E provide a lot of entertainment just because of the nature of the cars. And when you've got that comparison to how a street circuit works in a Formula One race, it's two complete different things. But I think the Japan race is going to be really interesting. And, you can't predict who is going to win going into it. You'd be a very brave person to put a bet on it.
It may be hard to predict, but I'm going to give you a challenge. And I won't give it, not a specific pecking order, but who do you think is going to be in the hunt?
Given that obviously Jaguar have been the most consistent team, you're never going to be able to rule them out. So Mitch and Nick are going to be right in there. I think Jake Dennis and Andretti have got really a lot to prove after a slightly dodgy couple of races through their poor qualifying. I wouldn't rule out Maserati either. They've shown a lot of consistency already. Max Gunter's been in the points in every race, I think, and Jayan Deruvala, who's actually had a lot of bad luck, and he was running in the points in Diriyah, so I wouldn't count either of them out because that car looks, when they get in the sweet spot, that car looks very, very nifty indeed. So I think that it's so wide open. I hate to do a cop-out on that, but I think it's so wide open, it's hard to say. But I'll stick my neck out and say that we'll have a redemption day for Jake Dennis, perhaps.
There we go. Perhaps he'll be the first repeat winner of the year. And that would be something quite impressive in Formula E to be a repeat winner so early on, such as the competitive nature of the series. But Jack, thank you for joining me for our chat on Formula E. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to discuss the all-electric series, and let's hope that Tokyo serves up just as much drama as Sao Paulo.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I'm sure it will.
As well as the Formula E Sao Paulo E-Prix over the weekend, IMSA returned to action in stunning fashion with the 12 Hours of Sebring, a race that came down to the wire. Joining me to chat about it today is Sportscar editor for Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday, Phil Oakley, and Sportscar reporter Mo Rehman. Chaps, thank you for joining me. First of all, did you enjoy the race?
Yes, Sebring always delivers, just every year. It's a great race.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, it does deliver. You'd have to be patient, especially with the cautions and stuff, but it does deliver, especially in IMSA, and after 12 hours. Yes.
Yes, I think a full house of agreement. I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. Mo, you touched on it there. Cautions definitely had their part to play this year. There was a number of them. I think we hit 12. So we had a caution per hour on average, but they're a bit more thick and fast come towards the end, and we got a little sprint to decide the outcome. About 20 minutes left, I think, after that final caution. Louis Delatraz in the number 40 Acura, passing Bourdais in the 01 Cadillac for the win. What did you make of that sort of little showdown at the end there, Phil?
I really enjoyed the last half hour or so. It was just excellent, and I loved Delatraz's move on board. He kind of feigned to the outside, and then went to the inside and just took the opportunity and went for the gap, and it worked. And Bourdais was obviously not happy. He was almost pushed Delatraz off, I think, in the moments after. But Delatraz, I think, had the grip and maybe slightly faster car at the time just to keep the lead. After that, it was just good racing.
Mo, would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you I love it when these things go down to the wire, and that was exactly that, organic racing in front of us. And it was like, well, the context being that the 01 towards the end was off its fuel strategy. It underfueled at some point, but then they basically went back on strategy compared to their rivals. So at that last pit stop, I think Louis Detras got new tyres, whereas Bourdais didn't, because they wanted track position. So that was kind of their task, was retain track position, see how long we can keep it. And Sébastien Bourdais, yes, he definitely did not want to give that position up, but yeah, it was a good fight. It was kind of, I guess, heartbreaking for them to lose that position. I guess the Cadillacs demonstrated quite good pace as well. So it was certainly a winning contender in that 01 Chip Ganassi Cadillac.
Talking about that move that Delatraz made, it was amazing, sort of 11 hours and 55 minutes of racing, that it came down to like a hard move. Like, it wasn't cautious really, sort of threw caution to the wind, and that was sort of going up and down the field. There were some pretty bold moves being made, which is probably why debris was flying over the place and bringing out the full course cautions in the first place. But Jack Hawksworth in the Vasser Sullivan Lexus in GTD Pro, for example, just decided at the end that, this is my 20 minutes to shine, and third to first with some forceful manoeuvres would be a pretty good way of describing that, especially on the number 62 Risi Ferrari, which shoveled that car back, which was remarkably in contention after that spin at the start.
The general feeling on that was the Vasser Sullivan Hawksworth probably should have got a penalty, which I think is probably fair enough. He did kind of push the Ferrari off.
There was a penalty, wasn't there, for the Rexy car, I think. Lauren Heinrich pushed Daniel Juncadella off into the gravel just to make Corvette's day even worse when it already was. And they did get a penalty. But then obviously Fred Macavecchi in the number 6 Porsche did that final corner shunt into Catherine Legg in the 66 Acura NSX, and that was left unpunished, or at least by the race officials. But then the car itself decided to punish Macavecchi.
If I'm to interrupt you there, it's an interesting detail that that debris from that, puncture is putting it lightly, it was a bit of a mess, but that it happened right in front of the 18 Euro Motorsport car, which won LMP2, but because of that debris went into their radiators of their car, then they had to pit slightly early. So they had their own while of a race. They were in the lead, then they went to 10th, and then they were kind of back there until the end. Quite an action-packed race from that side.
Yeah, it was definitely an action-packed race. I mean, even the number 18 Ericar had the spin and the save from Conor Zilisch, and then a few hours later he managed to make sure that car won the LMP2. Not a bad start to life for them, as it 2 wins. And then there was a really dramatic moment halfway through with Pipo Derani, which kind of turned the race on its head, didn't it, Phil?
Yeah, that crash was unexpected for Derani, although he always kind of he feels like he's always teetering on the edge a little bit sometimes in some of his moves through traffic. But yeah, a dramatic crash. I don't really know how you come back from a crash like that as a driver. I guess he's a professional driver, so he'll just brush it off. But for us kind of normies, I don't know how you come back from turning a car over and landing on top of a barrier.
I mean, he only had a lot of time to think about it whilst he was hanging upside down. He didn't get quite set free for a while.
All the blood pumping to his head probably made him quite lightheaded. I was glad he got out of that car. And he wasn't even winded, I heard. He's walking perfectly normally, which is incredible.
Yeah, the car itself didn't have to... I mean, it looked mainly cosmetic, and obviously there was some damage to the front corner and things like that. But in terms of the tub and everything, it looked fairly solid. I don't know if any of you guys saw, there was a really funny clip going around on social media of one of the fans running to the scene and attempted to jump over the fence to go and help, not knowing that if he'd gone anywhere near the car, it probably would have electrocuted him.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting with the, if you say going through the traffic, we haven't seen many other angles other than that. I think it's just the one angle we've seen of the incident, isn't it?
No, I definitely want to see the onboard from both the Ferrari with Molina and the Cadillac with Derani. I think it probably was Durrani's fault. He had quite a lot of space to his left, I think, and just basically didn't use it.
Yeah, it certainly looked from the angle we had, but Derani sort of caused it, so hopefully we will get them. But yeah, that caused one of the many full course cautions, and obviously those created the drama we had at the end, up and down the field. But I know, Phil, there was you had a little bugbear with the full course cautions and the way that they're applied in IMSA.
IMSA's full course cautions kind of annoy me. There's debris which could be cleared up in 20 seconds, and there's a 20-minute safety car period for something that is gone within a minute. They need to introduce some kind of system to rectify that, but they probably won't because they like whipping everything up, so it's all dramatic for a restart. So yeah, it's just one of those things, I think, but I don't really like it. It's a bit gimmicky in my head.
Yeah, Mo, would you agree with that?
Well, I definitely see Phil's sort of it can feel, especially during the race, can feel a bit interrupted when you this piece of debris that is at some certain corner out of nowhere causes the whole track to go under yellow. Oh, it's such a cliche expression when commentators say cautions breed cautions and stuff like that. But in IMSA, you do find that quite a bit, especially when especially when there's debris. And I mean, I'm a fan of like in the WEC and indeed Formula E, they can say full course yellow, and everyone is effectively they're supposed to be limited to 80 kilometers an hour or something with the button on the steering wheel, and that can, well, if you once you click play in that analogy, things can go back to normal. And this as Phil kind of described, yeah, that it does kind of elongate something that certain situations which don't need to be 20 minutes long to sort out. But I know that's how IMSA does it, and it is a bit it does reap the reward at the end. All the cars, what they do is they do these pass around procedures to keep as many cars as they can on the lead lap of their respective category. So it does kind of reap the reward towards the end. But yes, in the heart of it, it is kind of frustrating to have it interrupted.
Yeah, I think it must be even equally frustrating when it comes from the driver's point of view, and especially if they've built a margin or a gap and it ruins their pit stop strategy. I know that happened to the Rexy car, the number 77 AO Racing Porsche. I think one of the full course cautions, they were basically leading because Heinrich had been putting in a great stint. I think they built like a 20-second gap, and then the caution came out just at the wrong time for them, and it left them with loads of work to do.
It's probably also quite frustrating when they have their bronze drivers in, or they don't have them in that case, and then the caution comes out when you have your fast driver, and then half an hour wasted of their drive time or whatever, which is probably quite frustrating.
Yeah.
We may have mentioned, obviously, everybody fights to sort of stay on the lead lap, and there was one car, a GTP, that was doing that towards the latter stages, sort of hanging on to the end of the lead lap, and that was the Lamborghini, which had its IMSA debut. What did you guys both make of it? I mean, they managed to finish on the lumps and bumps of Sebring, which I think probably a good thing in itself. But yeah, what do you make of their debut and what's going on with their project in general?
Yeah, they finished the race, which I think was probably their aim. I don't think they had any other aim than that. And they finished seventh, which is pretty decent, really, for a car in its first year of competition, ahead of a factory Porsche, which is good. So, yeah, I don't think they can be really disappointed with that from a sort of reliability standpoint. Don't think the pace is really there for them yet. They were dropping off the back of the other GTPs at each restart pretty quickly. It didn't take them long to be sort of 3 or 4 seconds off, at least. But I'm sure the pace will come as they understand the car more in racing conditions. And engineers always say they'd rather have a reliable car that they have to make fast rather than a fast car that they have to make reliable. So seems they've got their priorities right in that sense.
And well, I think I agree with Phil for much of that, especially prioritizing reliability over pace. I think that's especially for a debut, that IMSA debut in GTP. They did quite a good job, apart from the issue with the door opening slightly. Mechanically, in terms of reliability, everything seemed okay. And yes, they didn't quite have the pace compared to the rivals, but they are their sort of the outlier in that GTP field. Their rivals have all got a substantially or significantly more experience. For Qatar, when that officially debuted, when the Lamborghini first debuted, and Phil mentioned about in that with one car, they had not gathering as much data as their rivals, but they did a good job. Sebring is very tough, and usually, as you mentioned, Dan, it's very bumpy. It puts strain on the drivers, but also, well, their drivers are quite professional, but also on the car's electronics. For a new car to debut at Sebring is quite an ask. So I think it did its job.
I think they're the only car in the GTP field, aren't they? With the Ligier next gen LMP2 chassis as well, aren't they? So there's another sort of outlier for them going against the curve. And again, it was going against the curve in terms of Ligier. Sean Creech Motorsport managed to wiggle their way into P4 by the end after languishing towards the bottom at one point. So yeah, a better outing for them compared to Daytona.
Yeah, they did. They did well. And there was any way you can look at that after their Daytona debut with that car, not really going to plan, I don't think. To finish fourth in LMP2 is probably an achievement, and I imagine they're fairly happy with that. LMP2 is incredibly tight, so as we know, it's just so tight to actually finish in that, finish well, because everyone's just bunched up. So yeah, to be fourth in that car is really good.
And a quick one to end. I'm going to ask you both to pick your moment of the race, if that's possible, after 12 hours of running. Who wants to go first with picking their moment? I'm putting you on the spot, and I guess I'll have to put myself on the spot as well.
I'll say the Wayne Taylor car that didn't win, the 10, the Konica Minolta blue and black one, overtaking Maxime Martin for the lead, roughly halfway through, maybe a bit more than that, I think. That was a good move. I think it was Taylor in that car at the time. But yeah, it was good. I liked seeing the BMW sort of battling with the Acura. So yeah.
Well, I would say I'm going to pick towards at the end when we had Conor Zilic of the 18 era car LMP2. What he did was fend off he had his lead after the pit stop, which was cunningly timed. It was amazing. But they went from like eighth to first. But yeah, in that moment, he was tasked with fending off that lead for the final minutes. He had Felipe Fraga in the 74 Riley car. Felipe Fraga is significantly more experienced, and he must have had an off and dropped down as Phil said, LMP2 is so incredibly tight. In a matter of minutes, this one mistake, perhaps it's a mistake, perhaps it's a reliability thing we didn't quite see on the broadcast, but it cost them and the points haul in terms of the championship. They're still second, as I said, but Era have got 2 wins in a row, and they'll creep away with it, and that'll be something I think Riley will. Next time they'll really want to close that gap.
You've given me the easy choice then, so I'll go with the fight between Delatraz and Bourdais at the end, just because I think at 1:30 in the morning, after a few cups of coffee, that was the thing that was keeping me going as well, and kept me awake, kept me sort of stood up and also sat down and reporting at the same time. So I'll go with that moment for me. That's my moment of the race. And yeah, I guess that brings an end to our conversation reviewing the 12 Hours of Sebring. So Phil, Mo, thank you once again for taking the time to speak with me. Appreciate it. And I guess all that's left for me to say is to keep tuning into Motorsport Speak on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Keep liking and subscribing. Make sure you keep up to date with motorsportweek.com and our free digital magazine motorsportmonday.com. And make sure you follow @MotorsportWeek on all the socials, including X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and even LinkedIn if you fancy it. But yes, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for some more Motorsport Speak.